Дорогі глядачі, вітаємо вас тут на українській телемережі «Контакт». Щойно ми були на прес-конференції провідника опозиції канадського парламенту П'єр Пор'євр. А тепер маємо нагоду поговорити із критиком офіційним міністра оборони Канади, МП із Манітоби, James Bezan. James Bezan, that was a welcome to you to our Contact show. Welcome to nice to have you back again. And this time we're welcoming you as the Shadow Minister of National Defence. And we would like to delve a little deeper, if we could, into the press release last weekend from the leader of the Conservative Party and the official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, about support for Ukraine in terms of some of the promises made and in terms of decommissioned equipment, military equipment that could be used in Ukraine. So if you maybe could explain what it is that Mr. Poilievre was referring to in the press conference of promises undelivered.
Right. So first of all, I think we got to point out that conservatives support Ukraine, full stop. Pierre Poilievre, the leader of the official opposition, leader of Canada's Conservatives, support Ukraine. And his statement that came out last week was very clear that we stand with Ukraine. We want to make sure that they get the munitions and weapons they need to win this war against the Russian invaders. What we are suggesting, and this was a request that actually came from the armed forces of Ukraine, is to have our soon-to-be disposed of CRV-7 rockets that have been sitting in storage for over 30 years. They are in our depot in Saskatchewan, and the government wants to dispose of them, send them to the scrap heap, rather than give them to Ukraine, where they can actually be utilized in pushing back the invasion from the Russian military and ultimately halt Putin's war machine. So we think that this is a good use of supplies. It's better for the Canadian taxpayer. Instead of paying to decommission, dispose of these weapons, it is far better in the hands of the Ukrainian forces in fighting against the Russians. We also know that over the years, over the last couple of years, we've been calling on this government to donate more of our surplus weapons that are being disposed of. We started in March of 2022, a month after the war started. And we pointed out that there was a number of light armored vehicles, our Bizons, our Coyotes, our armored ambulances that were in the process of getting replaced. And instead of sending those to the scrapyard, they should be donated to Ukraine. We actually asked the government about this over a year and a half ago when they would be able to get some of those delivered. And they said that there was at least 86 vehicles that they could repair and send to Ukraine in less than 200 days. The government has done nothing with them except decommission them, paying somebody to scrap them and not provide those weapons to Ukraine. I know they always say we want to give Ukraine new labs. Well, guess what? These light armored vehicles could have been delivered a lot faster and saved lives in the time it took to build new ones. We're not discouraging them from building new labs and getting them over there, but let's do what's expedient, let's do what's right, and let's save some dollars for the taxpayer. Instead of decommissioning and paying out contracts to have these disposed of, let's send rockets, labs, and other weapons that are no longer of any use to the Canadian Armed Forces to Ukraine.
Now, James, you mentioned the labs. How much upgrading do they need for them to be actually used now? Is it a matter of a little bit of fixing, a week or two, or is this a long-term proposal, or are you suggesting they be sent just in the state that they are in?
Well, I know that the Americans and the Australians sent over a number of their M113 armored personnel carriers, which were critical to the liberation of Kharkiv back in 2022. And I know that if we send over our soon to be disposed of labs, that they would be fully utilized by the Ukrainian military. They're resilient, they're industrious, What they can use, they'll use. What they can't, they'll cannibalize and use as spare parts in the other machines. And that's the way that wars are actually fought. You fight with what you got, and we got labs that are the Bison and Coyotes and the armored ambulances that are currently being removed from service in Canada and replaced with brand new ones. I'll take the older ones, which are still in working order, and send them to Ukraine and let them fight back as best they can. While they're waiting for contracts to be signed to buy new vehicles that's been promised by this government. And, the Liberals have made lots of promises, and they have delivered on some of those promises. But we know that the 50 labs that were promised by Trudeau to Zelensky when he was here in September, those contracts still haven't been signed. We know that over a year ago, he promised to send over the NASAMS air defense system. That weapon system hasn't even been ordered yet, and we don't know where the $406 million has gone to purchase the weapon system from the Americans. So, this war isn't going to be won on promises. It actually has to be won on results and actual follow through and deliveries. And so we expect the government to provide Ukraine with what we no longer need here for our Canadian Armed Forces. But at the same time, as we send over things like tanks and howitzers and other munitions and weapons, we need to make sure we replace all of those weapons here in the Canadian Armed Forces so that we're not doing without, and that Canada is safe as well.
Mr. Bezan, a question to you as Shadow Minister, National Defence. Are you in favor of extending the Unifier program, and to a lesser extent within your profile, but probably of concern to you too, the free trade agreement, the upgraded free trade agreement? The Conservative Party voted against bills that actually included these projects. And it almost seems like that you may have been against these projects. Here's an opportunity for you to speak whether indeed you were against, or was that clouded under, by other issues that were foremost in those bills?
I appreciate the question, Yuri, and I can tell you that we're the official opposition. We are, by our parliamentary system, we are to oppose the government. But let's keep in mind, Operation Unifier was started by Stephen Harper and the Conservative government. Operation Unifier at that point in time was voted against by the official opposition of the day, which included the NDP and the Liberals. So, we can say we've all voted against Operation Unifier at some point in time, but we support training Ukrainian troops to be able to go out there and fight back professionally. I just was in Britain back in August with the National Defence Committee, and I also traveled on with my colleague Pat Kelly into Ukraine late August to see how our training has been, resulting in positive outcomes for the Ukrainian armed forces. And I can tell you that by providing the training that we have, since 2015, first at Yavoriv where I've been, and now at Camp Lid in Britain, it is making a difference. It is helping with the survivability of Ukrainian forces. And we're talking about lots of recruits going out there with no background, no experience now, and the only military training they're getting is what the Canadians are providing in Britain. We support that 100%. We voted against an economic bill. We voted against a confidence motion that was before the House against this government. We have lost confidence in Justin Trudeau and the Liberals, and that's what we voted against. It's not that we voted against Ukraine. We support Ukraine 100%. On the free trade agreement, Bill C-57, that's before the House, we've got to remember that the Liberals have now put in a poison pill, and they've added a carbon tax into the language of the free trade agreement. The Conservative government, under Ed Fassett, when he was the trade minister, negotiated the first free trade agreement, the current free trade agreement with Ukraine. And it doesn't have anything about carbon taxes. In fact, all the free trade agreements that Canada currently has in place, and the ones that the Liberals are actually negotiating past and beyond the one with Ukraine to update the current Canada-Ukraine free trade agreement, has nothing in it about carbon taxes or carbon pricing. And I know a lot of people say, well, Ukraine's already got a carbon tax. Let's put things into picture. And we'll always vote against any legislation that impacts Canada or our allies that has carbon pricing in it. Ukraine currently has a carbon tax. It applies to about 60% of their industry at a rate of 54 cents a metric ton of carbon, where in Canada, that price is currently $69 a ton and going up to $170 a ton under this Liberal government. We are opposed to that type of disparity. We're seeing our cost of living going up. And so we will not enshrine carbon tax in any of our trade deals, including the one with Ukraine. If we form government in the next election, we will renegotiate that free trade agreement. That'll be a better free trade agreement that will ensure that we are able to do trade. We can make sure that there is, some wartime risk insurance in there as well, which currently doesn't exist in the current free trade agreement that the Liberals have brought forward in Bill C-57. And we'll make sure that our defense industries can collaborate with Ukraine and build more of the munitions and weapons they need right in Ukraine to help them there and provide opportunity for Canadian workers right across the board. And I think the final point I'd like to make as well is that instead of talking about carbon taxes, we should be talking about sending more Canadian energy to Europe to displace Russian natural gas, Russian oil. We should be sending more of our Canadian-made oil and gas, create jobs here in Canada, and displace that Russian energy, which is right now fueling Putin's war machine, and help Europe be completely free of any of that Russian unethical oil and gas.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. This was James Bezan, Shadow Minister of National Defence, explaining the Conservative Party's support for Ukraine and their terrible war with the Russian invasion and aggression. Mr. Bezan, thank you very much for being with us, and hopefully we can keep you on the list for future updates a little bit more often.
For sure. Дякую. Слава Україні.
Героям слава!